styles, everyday finds, one place. Welcome to Shack Shop, your go-to online store for women's fashion and must-have essentials. From trendy outfits to lifestyle items you didn't know you needed, it's all here. Easy shopping, great prices, new arrivals dropping often. Shop smarter. Shop Shack Shop. Visit us online today.
For much of his career, Jack Smith operated far from television cameras and political theater. Known among legal circles as relentless, methodical, and intensely private, Smith built a reputation as a prosecutor who preferred court filings to press conferences and evidence to speculation. For years, the public knew little about him beyond a stern photograph and a resume packed with war crimes prosecutions and public corruption cases. That era of anonymity is now over. On Thursday morning, Smith is scheduled to testify publicly before the House Judiciary Committee, marking the first time he will openly explain, in detail and on the record, why he pursued criminal charges against President Donald Trump. The hearing is expected to draw millions of viewers and could become one of the most consequential congressional events of the year. The stakes are enormous. Trump is once again president, having won the 2024 election. Smith is no longer special counsel, and both political parties see the hearing as an opportunity either to validate or dismantle the most aggressive criminal investigations ever launched against a former and sitting U.S. president. From shadow prosecutor to national figure, Smith's rise to public prominence was never part of the plan. When Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed him as special counsel, the mission was narrow but explosive: determine whether Trump committed federal crimes related to efforts to overturn the 2020 election and whether he unlawfully retained classified materials after leaving office. Smith largely avoided commentary while the investigations unfolded. He spoke only when legally required, announcing indictments, responding to procedural rulings, or correcting public misinformation. His silence, however, fueled speculation on both sides of the political spectrum. Supporters of the investigations viewed him as the embodiment of accountability. Critics cast him as a symbol of what they described as a politicized Justice Department. Now, Smith is preparing to speak for himself. What Smith is expected to say? According to prepared remarks reviewed by multiple outlets, Smith plans to defend his actions forcefully, but within the confines of Justice Department policy and legal precedent. At the center of his testimony is a blunt assertion: had the election interference case gone to trial, the evidence would have supported a guilty verdict. Smith is expected to emphasize that his decisions were driven exclusively by facts and law, not politics. "I made my decisions without regard to political affiliation, ideology, or electoral consequences," Smith is expected to tell lawmakers. The evidence showed willful violations of federal law. He will argue that declining to prosecute would have amounted to abandoning his duty as a prosecutor. One of the most scrutinized aspects of Smith's work involves Trump's actions following the 2020 election. Smith's team examined months of conduct, including pressure on state officials to overturn certified election results, attempts to organize alternative slates of electors, repeated public claims of widespread voter fraud despite a lack of supporting evidence, efforts to delay or obstruct the certification of electoral votes. Smith concluded that these actions formed part of a coordinated effort to subvert the peaceful transfer of power. Importantly, Smith has consistently maintained that the investigation was not about protected speech, but about actions taken to undermine lawful government processes. January 6th and its aftermath. Smith is also expected to reiterate his position that Trump's post-election conduct contributed to the events of January 6, 2021. While Smith did not charge Trump with directly organizing the Capitol riot, he argued that Trump attempted to use the chaos as leverage to prolong his hold on power. According to Smith, the violence at the Capitol was not an isolated event, but part of a broader effort to disrupt the certification process. Why the case was dropped. Despite securing indictments, Smith ultimately dismissed the election subversion case after Trump won the 2024 election. The reason was procedural, not evidentiary. The Justice Department maintains a long-standing policy prohibiting the prosecution of a sitting president. Smith has stated repeatedly that the policy compelled him to halt the case, even though he believed the evidence met the legal threshold for conviction. This distinction, dropped, not disproven, is likely to be a focal point of his testimony. The classified documents case. Smith's second major investigation involved classified materials retained at Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. According to court filings, the documents included highly sensitive national security information stored in unsecured locations, including a bathroom, a ballroom used for public events, storage areas accessible to staff and guests. Smith is expected to testify that tens of thousands of people passed through the property during the period when the documents were stored there. However, much of Smith's final report on this case remains sealed due to a court order limiting what he can discuss publicly. A hearing built for conflict. House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan initially resisted holding a public hearing, preferring a closed-door interview. That interview, later released in full, showed Smith confidently defending his legal reasoning under intense questioning. Now, with cameras rolling, Republicans are expected to escalate their attacks. They have accused Smith of targeting Trump for political reasons, overstepping DOJ authority, engaging in selective prosecution. Smith is expected to counter each claim methodically, emphasizing that DOJ policies were followed at every step. Democrats see a rare opportunity. Democrats view the hearing as a chance to put the evidence, not just the indictments, in front of the public. Representative Ted Lieu and other lawmakers have urged Americans to watch the proceedings closely, arguing that Smith's testimony could clarify misconceptions surrounding the investigations. Their goal is not just to defend Smith, but to reframe the narrative around presidential accountability. Trump's response. Trump, for his part, has continued to insist that the 2020 election was stolen, a claim repeatedly rejected by courts and election officials. He has also suggested that those involved in investigating him should face consequences, including possible prosecution. Smith has acknowledged that retaliation is a possibility, but maintains that legal accountability must be pursued regardless of personal risk. Core message from Smith. Smith's central argument is simple but profound. No individual, including a president, is above the law. He is expected to tell lawmakers that the rule of law only functions when prosecutors are willing to apply it evenly, even under extraordinary pressure. If Democrats see Jack Smith's public testimony as a chance to reaffirm the legitimacy of the Trump investigations, Republicans see something very different, a long-awaited opportunity to put the prosecutor himself on trial in the court of public opinion. From the GOP's perspective, the hearing is not merely about explaining past legal decisions. It is about reframing the entire Trump saga as evidence of what they describe as a decade-long campaign by federal institutions to neutralize a political movement. At the center of that effort stands House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan's high-risk calculation. Jordan did not initially want Jack Smith testifying in public. Behind closed doors, the Ohio Republican was wary of giving Smith a national platform, particularly one that could allow the former special counsel to walk viewers through evidence that jurors never got to see. Instead, Jordan pushed for a private interview, arguing that sensitive legal matters did not belong in a televised spectacle. That interview took place last month, and by most accounts, it did not go the way Republicans had hoped. The released transcript and video showed Smith calm, precise, and deeply familiar with the evidence. When pressed on accusations of bias or overreach, he responded with citations to DOJ regulations, Supreme Court precedent, and internal policy guidance. Rather than appearing rattled, Smith often seemed to be teaching a masterclass in prosecutorial discretion. It was after that closed-door session and growing pressure from Democrats that Jordan agreed to a public hearing. The decision now carries political risk. The GOP's core argument. Republicans are expected to hammer Smith on three central themes: weaponization of government, selective prosecution, abuse of investigative powers. These arguments are not new. They have been echoed by Trump himself, conservative media figures, and GOP lawmakers for years. What changes now is the audience. This time, Republicans are not speaking only to their base or to sympathetic commentators. They are making their case directly to voters watching live television. The term weaponization of government has become a catch-all phrase for Republican grievances related to law enforcement, intelligence agencies, and regulatory bodies. In the context of Smith's testimony, Republicans are expected to argue that Trump was treated differently than other political figures. Prosecutorial discretion was used aggressively against him. Timing of charges coincided with election cycles. Jordan and his allies will likely frame Smith as the embodiment of this alleged abuse, a career prosecutor who, in their telling, crossed the line from law enforcement into political activism. Smith, however, is expected to respond by emphasizing consistency. According to his prepared remarks, he plans to state plainly that he would have pursued the same charges against any former president of either party under identical circumstances. The phone records controversy. Perhaps the most politically explosive issue Republicans plan to raise involves Smith's acquisition of phone records belonging to several sitting Republican senators during the election interference investigation. The revelations sparked outrage when they surfaced last year. Republicans accused Smith of targeting lawmakers without justification, violating separation of powers norms, chilling legislative independence. Speaker Mike Johnson has publicly said Smith has a lot to answer for, echoing sentiments expressed by Senate Republicans who were affected by the subpoenas. What actually happened? According to public reporting and Smith's prior testimony, the phone records were obtained through lawful court-approved processes. Importantly, such records typically include metadata, such as call logs and timestamps, not the content of communications. Smith has stated that the requests were narrow in scope, they were tied to specific investigative leads, they complied with DOJ guidelines. He has also emphasized that the investigation did not criminally charge any members of Congress. Still, Republicans argue that the optics alone were damaging. Jordan's line of attack. Jordan is expected to press Smith on whether he personally approved the phone record requests and whether alternative investigative avenues were considered. He has framed the issue as emblematic of a Justice Department willing to push boundaries when Trump or his allies are involved. In interviews, Jordan has described Smith's tenure as part of a decade-long ordeal targeting Trump, language designed to connect Smith's actions to earlier investigations, including the Russia probe. Smith, by contrast, is expected to draw a sharp distinction between separate investigations conducted by different officials across different administrations. Limits on what Smith can say. One factor working to Republicans' advantage is what Smith cannot discuss. A federal court order continues to seal significant portions of Smith's final report on the classified documents case. That order, issued by U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon, restricts the Justice Department from publicly releasing details related to the investigation. Judge Cannon previously dismissed the classified documents charges against Trump, ruling that Smith's appointment as special counsel was improper, a decision that remains highly controversial among legal scholars. Smith is expected to respect the court's restrictions during the hearing, declining to answer certain questions or offering only high-level responses. Republicans may use those refusals to suggest evasiveness, even though Smith is legally bound by the order. Trump enters the fray again. On the eve of Smith's testimony, Trump urged Judge Cannon to make the sealing order permanent. In public statements, Trump accused Smith of attempting to destroy reputations and imprison political opponents, language consistent with his long-standing portrayal of the investigations as personal vendettas. Trump has also warned that individuals involved in investigating him could face consequences, a message that looms over the hearing even if it is not explicitly addressed. Smith has previously acknowledged that retaliation is possible, but has said fear of personal consequences cannot dictate prosecutorial decisions. Republicans' secondary goal, rallying the base. Beyond challenging Smith's credibility, Republicans have another objective: energizing voters. A televised confrontation with a prosecutor many conservatives already distrust offers an opportunity to reinforce narratives of institutional bias, mobilize grassroots supporters, frame Trump as a victim of entrenched power. The hearing is expected to be confrontational, emotional, and at times chaotic, all elements that play well on social media and cable news. Smith's strategy, restraint and records. Smith is not expected to match Republican intensity with rhetoric. Instead, his approach is calculated. Stick to the evidentiary record, avoid inflammatory language, reiterate legal standards repeatedly. This contrast may frustrate some viewers, but could bolster Smith's credibility among undecided audiences. He is expected to remind lawmakers that grand juries approve the indictments, not political appointees acting alone. Why this moment matters. The clash between Jim Jordan and Jack Smith is about more than personalities. It represents a fundamental disagreement over the role of prosecutors in democratic systems, the limits of presidential power, whether accountability mechanisms can survive political polarization. For Republicans, the fear is that allowing prosecutions of former presidents opens the door to endless political retaliation. For Democrats, the fear is the opposite, that exempting presidents from accountability effectively places them above the law.